Uh, can I talk about academia for a second here? Uh, can I talk about our society? Because there were all those stories a little bit ago about replication crises, about how people keep trying to run replication studies in a lot of fields and they're coming up with surprising results. And I feel like people complain a lot about people are losing trust in experts. And I think that's a problem because I think experts deserve trust in our society more than anyone else does. I think academia deserves trust more than anyone else in our society. But I don't think it deserves our trust that much because whenever I look at it, I'm like, this is awful. This is like, I would compare academia today. I've made this comparison before in conversations with other people. I would compare academia today to the Catholic Church in the High Middle Ages. Because if I were a peasant in the Middle Ages, probably the only person who can read in my village is like the local priest. And the local priest probably knows more than I do about almost everything. The local priest probably knows when is the next equinox going to be, about how big is the earth. Like, the local priest probably knows more about history and geography than I do. Like, the local priest is the smartest person in town. I think that in the High Middle Ages, the Catholic Church, of all the institutions that existed at the time, deserved more trust than everyone around it, than anyone else. But it still has a lot of problems. Like, I'm not Catholic. I think the Catholic Church is wrong about most of its like central doctrines. So like, when I say that academia is the most trustworthy thing our society has, I say it kind of the same way. I say it with like disappointment because I kind of don't trust academia. I I don't trust professors all that much. I don't trust scientists all that much. I but I think that a lot of that can be fixed. I think with social media, with the internet, we've gotten to a point where anyone can kind of share their story and where the stories that get shared a lot and the stories that people believe a lot in are just the stories that are more shareable. We've lost a lot of the gatekeepers of our information economy. Like, just like 30 years ago, from what I can tell, it was a very different world. Like, you could learn things like through TV and through like the newspapers and magazines, and that was kind of it. Like, so the people who owned the TV and the news and the magazines had just a massive amount of influence over what everyone thought. And to be clear, I think that that's worse. I think that like a small number of people should not have all of that power over like what information does and doesn't get out there. Uh, but I think social media is part of the reason it's kind of tearing our society apart politically, is because everyone is realizing that none of the institutions that we used to put our trust in are worthy of trust. People are realizing that, and I think they're right about that. But the problem is that, like, when I decide not to trust those institutions, what happens with me, and I think what happens with basically everyone, is you decide to trust your own biases more instead. Because, like, how else are you going to decide what to believe? I think there's a solution to this, or at least there are solutions to this. I think basically what we need is we need better epistemic institutions. And epistemic just means having to do with knowledge. We need an academia and a news media that actually deserves our trust. And I don't just mean the people who run them need to be better people. I mean, we need the whole system to work differently. Like, when I was in elementary school, I learned about the government. I learned how laws were made. Like, we all learn how laws are made as kids. We all learn about how Congress people are elected. We all learn about how the president is elected. We all learn about how Congress votes on bills and how it needs to pass both houses and the president needs to not veto it. We all learn about how the Supreme Court works and how the people in the Supreme Court are chosen and how they get to decide whether something is constitutional or not. Like, we all learn about all of this, and we also learn, like, why it's set up this way, and we all learn how to change it if we want. We all learn how amendments work. Who chooses professors? If a professor needs to be fired, like if a professor is being really bad at being a professor, who decides whether the professor gets fired or not? Whoever that is, who chooses them? Who funds universities exactly? Like, from what I can tell, it's like it comes from kind of different sources. It comes from the government and from tuition fees. And who decides who that money is spent? Whoever decides how that money is spent, who chooses them? I honestly don't know. Like, okay, probably most of us have heard of the idea of peer review, right? Right? Who owns academic journals exactly? Who owns them? Who gets to decide what is and isn't published in an academic journal? How are academic journals funded? When things are peer reviewed, how do they find people to review it? Are the people who review it paid? Are they not paid? Are they just volunteers? How do they decide who to fund it or not? Like, what gives a university its authority? Like, from what I can tell, most universities kind of recognize each other as legitimate. But like, if someone wanted to start up a new university, who would they need to go through? Like, what do you need to do in order to get other universities to accept you as a legit university? Like, I literally know the answer to zero of these questions. I really wanted to make a whole series of videos talking about all of this, like how academia works as an institution. I still want to make those videos. But I feel like the moral of that is that, like, none of us know I don't think many of us know the answers to all of the questions I just asked. And I'm kind of scared that if I look for it, I'm not going to like the answers I'll find. And I think this is a big reason why misinformation is spreading so much. None of us know who to trust. All of us used to trust academia and the news media, just kind of out of habit. But now we're increasingly trusting our own biases more and more instead of that. Like, no one trusts those old sources of authority anymore, and perhaps rightly so. But I think we need epistemic institutions. We need institutions of people. We need institutions of experts all trying to, like, establish truth together. And we need institutions of reporters, basically, reporting on what those experts find and, like, explaining that to the public in a way that they can understand. But we all need to understand and be on the same page about who these people are and where they get their money and who chooses them. Like, we all need to be on the same page about why things work, about how things work, and how they work the way they do. And if we don't have that, I don't think we're ever going to have trust in our institutions again. I don't think we're ever going to have trust in experts again until we have institutions that earn that trust. Until we have institutions that make it clear how they operate and why they operate that way. Because otherwise, if we can't do that, I see no end to this. If we can't do that, I see no end to people just trusting people that say things that they like, things that sound right to them.